Marvel's Deadpool VR is the first Quest exclusive I've been looking forward to since Batman Arkham Shadow. Now, I'm a huge Batman fan, but not that into Deadpool by comparison. Don't get me wrong, I like Deadpool. I've seen all the movies and think I've even got a copy of New Mutants number 98 buried somewhere in my parents' basement. But he's not my favorite. The constant joking and breaking of the fourth wall gets a little annoying for me. But I think that helps to make my review less biased, and to that end, my verdict is that Deadpool VR is one of the games I've had the most fun playing on the Quest 3. Although, it's not without its flaws, and we'll get into all of that in this video. But before we do that, if you could please like this video and subscribe to the channel, I'd really appreciate it. I'm not a full-time YouTuber and only do these videos in my spare time to bring more awareness to VR games, so your continued support helps to keep the channel going. Thanks in advance. The humor in Deadpool VR is similar to the Deadpool comics and movies, with lots of jokes and breaking of the fourth wall. There were times when the humor felt a bit overdone, but again, if you enjoyed the movies, then I think you'll feel the same about the game. Some of it is quite funny and made me laugh out loud. Without getting into spoilers, there's one running gag in particular that I liked about Deadpool going to ninja school. At first, it sounds like a stupid one-off joke, but then all this lore builds up around it, all the way until the end of the game. Deadpool also spends lots of time acknowledging that he's in a video game, both directly to the player and to the other characters, making quips about lazy video game devs reusing assets or how the player sucks. Some of this also takes the form of Deadpool directly providing you with tips and tricks about the game, and that's a pretty cool way to create a connection between the character and the player. There are other times though when the dialogue gets a bit stale, and for me this was particularly true with respect to the relationship between Deadpool and Spiral. There's only so many different ways that you can listen to her call Wade an idiot, and she even constantly berates him over the level select screens, which is really annoying when you're trying to read the info. Neil Patrick Harris is the voice actor for Deadpool, and he sounds a lot like Ryan Reynolds. So much so that many people actually thought this was Ryan Reynolds when they saw the pre-release clips. It would have been interesting to see what MPH sounded like if he'd designed his own Deadpool voice.
NPH wouldn't do that, right?
But I suppose they wanted to go with a tone of voice that's already familiar to audiences. There are occasional cracks in the facade where he doesn't quite sound like Ryan Reynolds, or when he just sounds outright exhausted after reading the mouthful of dialogue they've given him, but again, they acknowledge this by breaking the fourth wall and making fun of it. The voice acting in this game is overall top-tier talent. Like, Dolph Lundgren is randomly in this game, and I had no idea until I saw the end credits. I don't even remember anyone talking about him in the reviews. Overall, you've got a professional lineup here, and the voice acting doesn't disappoint. I'd call it one of the game's greatest strengths. Now, graphics is one of the areas where standalone Quest games fall short compared to, say, PSVR 2 or PC VR games, but good devs will find clever ways to design around those limitations, and Deadpool VR does exactly that by creating a cartoon atmosphere. In terms of the environment itself, the devs do a good job of making each level feel distinct, but there's not much in the way of VR interactivity outside of weapons and puzzles. There are lots of destructible objects in the environment, but they don't really seem to serve a purpose, as in there aren't any useful items hidden inside of them or anything like that. Although there are collectibles you can find in each level, namely in the form of Deadpool comics. The tutorial level begins with Deadpool engaging in a low-level mission for S.H.I.E.L.D., taking down Flag Smasher, a villain who I hadn't really heard of before, but who I guess is some sort of activist against excessive nationalism. Anyway, this level introduces you to a lot of the game's mechanics. There's an opening scene where you drive in a truck and they give you the option to go into a theatrical mode if you have motion sickness. Now, I do experience some motion sickness, specifically in racing and flight sims, so I opted for the theatrical mode, thinking it might be something like Resident Evil 4 on the PSVR 2, where instead of playing the vehicle scenes in VR, you play it on a projection flat screen. But in Deadpool VR, if you opt for the theatrical mode, it quite literally just plays that part of the game for you while you watch in a movie theater with other Deadpool characters. So just be forewarned that if you opt to skip such scenes, then you won't be playing them at all. There's a motorcycle chase at the end of the second level that you can also skip. I'd absolutely recommend trying to tough it out, even if you do experience some motion sickness, because it's absolutely epic and one of my favorite parts of the game, and maybe one of my favorite VR boss fights ever. And if it turns out that you just can't handle it, then there's nothing stopping you from restarting the boss battle and just skipping it entirely. By the way, if you want to adjust your comfort level, there are all sorts of options for doing so in the menu. You can choose between smooth and snap turning, how quickly you turn, and how big you want the vignettes to be when you're moving. They have some presets for this, but you can also change all of the settings manually yourself, so if you're experiencing motion sickness, you can put some guardrails in place to have a more enjoyable VR experience. In terms of gameplay, you start off with Deadpool's standard weapon loadout of dual guns and dual katanas, both of which have standard VR controls. In the case of the katanas, they're stored on your back and you retrieve them by reaching over either shoulder. To attack with the swords, you just hold the controller and swing your arms, and the sword mirrors your arm movement. The katanas seem to have pretty good motion tracking, and I didn't have much of a problem handling them in battle. You can also throw them at enemies. Throwing projectiles seems to pretty much be auto-aim. As long as you're facing the general direction of the enemy, it's pretty hard to miss. You can also parry attacks and projectiles with certain swords or under certain circumstances. The guns are holstered on either side of your hips, and you shoot them by aiming and pressing the trigger buttons. The aim is decent, but there were times when the mark seemed off. Eventually, there are weapons later on with laser sights that you can use for better accuracy. There's also a grappling hook that figures prominently in the game. This item is also located on your back and allows you to grapple onto areas where an experimental blue ball clears a path. And yet, Deadpool doesn't waste an opportunity to make some puns about blue balls because of this. The last part of Deadpool's loadout are explosive devices located on his wrist, which range from old-fashioned grenades to motion detector mines to gun turrets. You can also double jump and kick, slide, and run on walls. But there doesn't seem to be a crouch button, which was a curious choice. At the end of the tutorial, you face Flag Smasher, and it walks you through the combo system against bosses, where you're basically prompted to perform a series of motions before a timer runs out. This usually consists of sequences that include blocking an attack with your swords, counterattacking with the gun or katanas, grappling your opponent or something nearby, and finally blowing them up by planting a grenade. When you've completed the tutorial, Deadpool is suddenly sucked into a black hole and ends up on Mojoworld. Seeing Mojo was such a blast from the past. I remember this guy from comic books in the 90s, but hadn't heard much about him since then. Back in the comics of the early 90s, he used to run a TV show where contestants battled through deadly competitions. That's been changed to streaming culture in Deadpool VR, and it's honestly disturbing how effortlessly Mojo has adapted to a modern setting. Like, somehow the state of online streaming is even worse than the mindless television programming that Mojo was parodying back in the 90s. Mojo is voiced by John Leguizamo, and he's amazing. This is another instance where I had no idea who the voice actor was until later, but when I first heard Mojo, I was like, wow, this guy is doing quite a job of playing up the stereotype of the sleazy network executive. He's got great chemistry with Neil Patrick Harris, and the banter between the two of them is some of the best in the game. There's a green button in Mojoworld you can press to call Mojo, and it's pretty funny to annoy him in between missions and listen to the flavor dialogue. Mojo kidnaps Deadpool for two reasons. The first is that he wants to force Deadpool to compete in his arena games, and the second is that he wants Deadpool to kidnap a bunch of other comic book characters so that they can also compete in Mojoworld contests. Mojoworld serves as the central hub for the game. Level select is done with the character Spiral, and upgrades are done with the character Major Domo. This is where you can spend your credits to get weapon upgrades, some of which are just different skins, but others of which are substantive. You have to capture all the targets in order, so the levels are linear the first time through, but thereafter you can replay the levels however you want. Because your actions are also being televised, or rather streamed, you'll also gain credits for more entertaining combat. This usually consists of pulling off different finishing moves when your enemies are stunned, disposing of them in different ways such as headshots, or blowing them up with a grenade, or slicing them apart with a katana will all garner different levels of attention from your audience. There are also cabinets throughout the levels with different random weapons that you can unlock by jump kicking them, and this includes things like shotguns and automatic weapons, and the enemies also drop weapons that you can use. All of these dropped weapons have a finite amount of uses. In the case of the guns, it's until they run out of ammo, and with the handheld objects, you lose them when you throw them. But you'll always have an infinite supply of your base level katanas and infinite ammo in your base pistols. There are also unique weapons that you can load out and use in combat when your power bar fills up. These allow you to unleash a powerful special attack for a limited period of time. It's also accompanied by some rocking 80s and 90s songs, and I think I even heard an anime theme somewhere in there that I didn't recognize. But I did recognize a certain song from the Transformers soundtrack that brought a huge smile to my face. Unfortunately, I probably can't play any of these for you due to copyright restrictions, and interestingly, there's an option to turn these songs off for streaming purposes. Overall, the enemies in this game really aren't that challenging. I played through the entire game on normal mode, and it felt super easy. Like, I hardly ever died, and when I did die, most of the time it was due to booby traps or falling off a ledge, and not because of the enemies. I played a bit on the most difficult setting, and even then, combat didn't feel challenging, although admittedly I didn't play that difficulty setting for long. Regardless, you've got infinite ammo and healing factor, so if you can just keep your distance from from the enemies, it's difficult to get killed. In between each of the main levels are arena stages where you compete in various mini-games. These range from variations of standard games such as kill the man with the ball or capture the flag, to strapping you into mech suits so that you can obliterate your opponents. As you progress through these challenges, you'll also unlock the ability to play earlier levels of the game with different Deadpool variants like Lady Deadpool. Certain secret areas are only accessible with these variants, so that does give the game some amount of replayability. However, one thing that really slows this game down is that certain dialogue sections can't be skipped. Some can, but others can't, and I'm not exactly sure what the distinction is. For example, there's this long escalator ride that opens up the second level, and it's like a solid 5 to 10 minutes of dialogue that you can't skip. It's bearable the first time around, but later on, having to sit through all this additional dialogue is kind of grinding. Also, what's weird about replaying these levels as the other characters is that there's new dialogue for the Deadpool variants, but no new dialogue for any other characters. So, for example, this leads to some really weird situations where you play as Lady Deadpool, and she's got totally different dialogue with female-centric punchlines, but everyone is still referring to her as Sir or Wade. They try to play it off with a joke about misgendering, but it still sounds bizarre. I'm not sure why they recorded all this new character dialogue for the Deadpool variants, but then didn't re-record any of the other character dialogue. Probably time and money constraints, I'd guess. Still, unfortunately, the end result is kind of weird. The arenas offer a lot more in terms of instant replayability, especially since there's a wide selection of fun mini-games, but they can also get a bit repetitive against the AI opponents. Something that would make the arena levels more fun would be a true multiplayer mode with other human gamers, but I don't know if there are plans for anything like that. So, is Deadpool VR worth it? The main hang-up people seem to have with buying this game is the price tag. At $49.99, it's pretty steep compared to most other titles available for the Quest 3. But here's the thing, licensing a big Marvel property and getting talented voice actors costs money. So if you want to play a VR game based on a big IP, which is what I always hear VR fans saying they want, then you have to expect you'll pay more for it than you would to play some obscure indie game. Now, having said that, of course you still want to make sure you're getting your money's worth, and not just paying for the Deadpool name without an enjoyable VR experience. In my opinion, Deadpool VR is one of the most fun games I've played on a standalone Quest. It definitely has its shortcomings, but I'm hoping some of those that I've mentioned in this video, like the game being too easy and the inability to skip certain scenes, can be fixed in subsequent patches. But even absent that, this is a fun game with a high level of production and a fair amount of replayability. So I think if you're a Deadpool and or VR fan, this is definitely worth checking out. If you enjoyed this video, then please like and subscribe. I'm hoping to make more VR content going forward, and although I primarily focus on PSVR 2, I'd also love to cover more Quest exclusives, and your continued support helps to keep the channel going. Thanks so much, and I hope to see you in the next video. Take care.